Hello everybody, how's it going? I'm Alejandro, the CGI nerd, and I hope you guys are doing well tonight. Today we're going to be talking about variables in Houdini and being able to create some things like variables that will hold numbers and strings and things like that. So we'll do some simple variables and then go in and access some nodes inside of Houdini and also be able to set some parameters. So let's get started. So what is a variable? A variable is kind of like something that you can hold as a placeholder for something. It allows you to re-access a number or something that you want to change in the future, or maybe you don't want to change it, but it's something that you want to use within your code that is some sort of type of data. That data could be a number or a string. A string is a collection of characters. Hey Clint, how is it going? I hope you are doing well. You'd like to... I love seeing you here all the time. It's awesome. I can use a Clint variable today. Since Clint is in this stream, I can say Clint equals 100 because he's awesome. So that's the basic idea of a variable. You have a variable, we create a name for it, and then we assign it to something. So right now I've set the number to 100. Because we have the just because I chose that. Now let's take a look at being able to recall this. So let's do a simple print statement. So we can say print, and in the last lesson we did something like this where we said hello world, and we had it inside of quotation marks. Single quotes. In this case, instead of using a string there, I can actually put that variable that we created, Clint. And now when I run this, we should see that it prints that statement. So the variable right now is just 100. The cool thing is that we can use math operators on things like this. So we can say Clint now equals Clint plus 10. And then let's go into the next line and print Clint. Oops. Let's try that again. Clint. And we'll run this code again. And you can see that this time it runs it the first time and prints. We get the 100. Then we take that original 100 and we add 10 to it. And it creates a new value for Clint, which is now 110. And when we print it, we get that value here. Cool thing. So it doesn't have to be just numbers. We can actually connect it to strings. So we can do Clint is now equal to Clint is awesome. Let's put an exclamation mark there. There we go. And then let's print Clint and apply. So we can see that it runs it and then it gives us the value again, 100, then it adds 10 to it, and then we completely change the value to be something different now. In Python, the variable types are mutable, so sometimes it's limiting in that you can't like necessarily add or do some things with different types of Clints, but different types of variables, but you can go in and swap them if you need it to be something else completely. You can do that throughout your script as well. Sometimes, like right now, let's clear this. So let's say we had a variable, go with Clint, and we're going to say is equal. We'll make that equal to this value is equal to, so we want to be able to add another variable. I'm going to say CGI nerd is equal to 10. So if we want to print these together, let's say we wanted to add Clint plus CGI nerd and run this, we're going to get an error now. You can see that we're getting the errors because it's saying that the Clint variable that we have here is a string, and this variable here that we have for CGI nerd is a integer. So a cool thing that Python allows us to do is be able to change, it has a function that will let you change a variable type to another variable type. So in this case, we want it all to be strings, because that way we can add this value to the string. So we can do str, and then in parentheses, add CGI nerd. So let's try running this. This value is equal to 10. So we were able to what's called concatenate two different values together, two variables, into a single string that we're able to print down here. So now let's see if we can get access to some of the stuff inside of Houdini, which is pretty cool. The Houdini library, to be able to access the commands, is called Who. So if we want to have access to it, the easy way to do that is to import Who. And then let's create some nodes here. So I'm going to create a geometry node, and inside of that node I will create a sphere and maybe attach a transform node and connect those together. So that way we have a sphere that's connected to a transform node that we can manipulate. If we look at the properties, right now everything's set to 0. But we can look at some of the information here. So let's look at the highest level. Let's rename this to my sphere so that I have access to it. So if we wanted the address to this particular node, Houdini actually gives us the feature to be able to drag and drop a node into our script editor here. And we can see that it gives us who.node and then the address for the node. So we're looking at the OBJ. So if we look over here, we are looking at object operators. So when we are in our scene view, that's what our address starts off at. And then my sphere is the name of this node. So we can also go inside of here and let's look at the sphere. So if we drop that in, we got who.node. And we have obj, my sphere, sphere 1. So I have sphere 1 here. That's what we're looking at. And we could guess that this is going to be the same as this, but it's going to say transform 1. So let's see if that's accurate. Instead of sphere 1, I'm going to clear that out, and then I'm going to drag it and drop this node into the script editor. And we can see that we do have that. It's who.node. We're in the object operators, and then we went into my sphere, So we can see that happening up here as well. And then transform1 is the name of this node. So that is pretty awesome. We can say we can hold that actual path into a variable as well. So let's say we wanted to have access to that path. We're going to say trans path. So this is going to be the transform path for that. And I am going to make that equal to that variable. So we can test to see if this is working properly by trying something out like print trans path dot path, and path is a feature inside of this class, the who.node class, that will give us access to the path if we did this correctly, and it will print out that path for this object. So let's apply this, and we can see that we have the information there. Let me do path, and I believe this is a function, so I have to open and close parentheses, and let's apply that there. And now this gives us the result that I was expecting. So the syntax worked before, but this is actually what I am looking for, is the path itself. So we had to run the path function to be able to access that. So basically we're looking at this variable. So if we were to write this completely out, what we're asking it to do, if we didn't have that variable, would be to print who.node, and then we tell it exactly what node we're looking at, and then dot path, open and close parentheses, and then close parentheses for the print statement. And here you can see that it prints it twice in a row because it's giving us access to the second print statement. And it's exactly the same thing. So whether we use the variable that we have here or we type out the whole path here, it's going to be exactly the same thing because we've made the variable equal to that. So let's look at parameters inside of here. So if I select this and I push P on the keyboard, we get access to the parameters here. And we can see that if we hover over any of these parameters, we have a, when I don't hover over it, but in this section over here, you'll see that it says parameters tx, ty, and tz. So tx, ty, and tz. T is to translate, and then x, y, and z would be its coordinates. So whether it's in the x, y, or z coordinates inside of the sphere, inside of the scene. Right now it is at 0, 0, 0. If we were to change this, for example, to 1, this is 1, moved 1 in the x direction. So if we wanted to be able to access something like this and be able to change and set a parameter, what we can do is, let's create that. Let me get this back. I want that trans path, so that way I have access to this, so I don't have to type all of this out over again. But what I want to do is do trans path dot param, and then I have to tell it what parameter I want to change. So let's say tx, like we were just doing right now. And then I'm going to put dot set, oops, not test, set. and then I need to put the value that I want to change it to. So let's put 1. Right now it is at 0. So let's run this, and we can see that using this code we were able to manipulate that value without having to go in and type that automatically. We actually went in and we changed this value using code. So again, this is using the variable, so if we wanted to do this the long way, we can go in and type that whole command as a single line, and it's going to be param tx, and that needs to be a string, dot set, and this time let's set it back to 0 because it's already at 1. So when I apply this, you'll see that it jumps back to the 0 and the value changed back to 0. So it is exactly the same thing. We're just using a variable to make it easier to access that information. Let's go in here. Okay, so the last thing that I want to show you guys is a easy way to kind of figure out how things work inside of Houdini for the actual Python code that is working in the background. So that way we can know how each one of these nodes work, and if we wanted to create a node similar to this in the future, we can do that, or we can just kind of figure out how things are working in the background of Houdini. So let's clear this really quick. Actually, I'm going to keep the trans path, and we'll look at the transform node, and we will check out the code for this transform node. So what I want to do is I'm going to do a variable, and let's call this oops, wrong window, file. So that is a variable name, so I'm going to say my file is equal to and we're going to open a file, and if the file doesn't exist, it's going to create it. So I'm going to say open, and let's create a file inside of my D drive, and I will call it my file so that I know where to look at it, .py. Okay, so I have this variable here now that's called my file. And then I want to do my file .write. And I am going to use this variable that we created because I want to find out what is inside of this transform node. And then I'm going to use the command as code, and then close that. And then I'm going to say my file dot close. So that will close the file that we just created. So let's try running this code here. Says no file exists. Oh, sorry. I forgot an attribute here. I have to tell it that we want to write a file. So if it doesn't exist, it's going to write it. So let's try this again. There we go. So that worked. And what it did for us was, if we look in the computer D drive, it created this file here. It's called my file. I am going to open it in Notepad++. And it opened up on my other monitor, so let me bring this over here so that you can see it. And we have all of the code that builds up that node inside of here. So if we wanted to, we can actually go through and dig in this node and figure out exactly how it works, and maybe figure out like what lock means and try to experiment with that. Or here we can see who.node.param, and we have been working with param today already, so we know that this is a parameter. Set is another thing, so what are we setting things to? And you'll see things over and over again also that has some comments so that we can know what that section or that block of code is. Usually if there's a comment, it's talking about a block of code, and then it's separated by a few spaces, and then you have another block of code. So that is kind of like how we can look at the back end of a lot of Houdini's nodes and figure out how it's working. As we go along, we can find out more and more about each of the nodes and figure out how to use them to work inside of our scenes. Another thing that is pretty useful is that here in Houdini, we've already imported who. So if we do who, and then we put a dot, you can see that it gives us all the available who objects that we can add here. So it's like a create or a function, a class or a function. These are all classes and functions that we can actually run. The one that we use a ton and that you probably saw in that other file that we created is the node. So we can see that we're creating a node. If we want, we can do that. And then inside of here, if we open up a parentheses, it kind of gives us context clues of how we are going to be using this node, any requirements. So it's required arguments, some example code here, and then also some related types of nodes or classes or functions that we can do that are similar to this that we might want to look at that is going to be similar. So this gives us a lot of opportunity to be able to search and find specific bits of code that we might not know or that we kind of are unsure of what they are exactly. And also, like with the who.node, if we wanted to find out more information about that, we can go to help and contents, and that opened it up over here. So let me bring it over here. And we can search something like who.node. And we can see that it's a class, and we have the who.node class. If we go in here, we have a whole bunch of information and example code on how to use this particular one. The who.node is huge, so it could take a while to get through of this, and then you have like expand, and it gives you more information. But yeah, that's kind of a little bit more about how to find out more about the who commands inside of Houdini. So I hope you guys found this useful. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe. I greatly appreciate it. It helps me out a ton. And we'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!